Okay, what if the reason your VA claim was just denied and it had nothing to do with your condition and everything to do with just a simple mistake or two? Every year, thousands of veterans lose out on benefits they earned because of avoidable errors, missing evidence, or just not understanding how the VA evaluates claims and how the process works in general. The worst part, most vets don't realize they made a mistake until it's too late, and then they're too tired to fix it. In this video, we're going to break down the 10 most common VA claim mistakes in my experience and how you can avoid them to give your claim the best chance of approval and to get the right rating. But before we dive in, if you're a veteran that's trying to navigate the claims process, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. I like to share clear, no nonsense strategies to help you avoid pitfalls and get the benefits that you deserve. And I like to base these on my experience in this process, just to give you guys a better chance of not wasting as much time as I did. So we're going to go right into this. Number one, it's just not gathering the sufficient evidence. I've messed this up a lot. I hear about people doing this. I know vets do this. There's three things the VA needs to prove each claim. Number one, they need a current diagnosis. So you need to have the right evidence to show that you have symptoms of a condition, and you're going to need medical evidence for this, right? Like you're going to need a doctor to say you have this condition, you are diagnosed with this condition. The VA needs that to approve a claim. If you don't have that, they will kick it back and they will tell you that you don't have a current diagnosis. The next thing, you need to be able to show that you have service connection, that, you need to anchor your condition to something that happened in the military. So, if you have medical records from when you were active duty to show that you had a condition and you can show that that condition's continued and that the condition that you currently have, is still connected to that time or that event, you need to be able to show that. Okay. And if you don't have medical records to show that, don't be discouraged. There are still ways. It is still possible. The VA knows that vets typically don't go to sick call, so don't let that discourage you, but you do need to be able to have evidence to prove it. And then, of course, you need to be able to have evidence to tie everything together. Okay, so that's probably the biggest mistake is this one right here, at least for me. I didn't really realize what it was that I needed to send. I just kind of figured the VA would figure it out. But don't make that mistake. Number two, missing deadlines. So I'm going to throw in the intent to file. The intent to file is not a deadline, but I want you to set it for yourself. The reason the intent to file is so important is because, today, like if you're just doing this and this is your first time, this is the first video you've watched, go online, create a va.gov, create an account, and then click on where it says, file a claim. File a claim, and what it'll do, it will secure or bookmark today's date as the date that it'll back pay you, assuming that you get something approved. It'll back pay you. So you get 1 year from that date to finish this. I just had a friend call me the other day and he said, hey, I did this intent to file like almost a year ago, but I didn't do anything. He's not going to miss the deadline because he still has time, but you don't want to miss that deadline. It gives you a whole year to get back pay. And it is nice when you get something approved and you get, $1,000 check in your bank account. That's important. Don't miss that. Get that intent to file. The other deadlines that I want you to be concerned about is when something's denied, you get a chance to appeal it. And a lot of times, and we'll talk about appeals in this, but a lot of times, there's different ways to appeal, and you'll get a year to do that appeal. Don't miss that because then it can backdate your pay as well. So that's another deadline that I don't want you to miss. Number three is, and I talked about this in number one, is just failing to establish service connection. And I throw it in here again because I want to highlight that service connection. You've got to be able to prove that your condition was connected to service. A buddy of mine, the same buddy, just called me the other day and he said, "Hey, I've got all these medical records. What do I do? Do I just submit all of them?" And my answer was like, yeah, eventually you will. But the first thing you need to be focused on is like, can you prove that condition that you have was connected to service? And if so, like how are you going to do it? If we don't have that in our mind, and a lot of times we do, we say, well, of course my knee pain is from all the running and road marches and jumping out of airplanes. But if we don't show the VA in evidence, we won't be able to prove the service connection. We can't just say, well, the VA should know this. And I wish that they could know this, but we're dealing with humans and we're dealing with a process. So make sure that you don't fail to establish service connection. And I'm not preaching this because I've definitely been the culprit on this. I've submitted things assuming that they would, and I'm telling you, they're going to send you back a letter saying that you did not establish service connection. So if you can avoid that up front, you will save yourself a lot of time. Number 4 is not considering presumptive conditions. So if you don't know what a presumptive condition is, it's essentially a condition that a veteran might have and some criteria to accompany it that the VA would say that the VA, presumes or assumes that the veteran that condition was caused by military service. Some examples of that, the most common one is tinnitus, ringing in the ears. So the VA considers ringing in the ears or tinnitus a presumptive claim for people that fall under certain, military occupation specialty codes or career fields, or just functions in the military, or even loud noise exposures. They presume those veterans to have, if they have that condition, they presume that it was caused by service, unless there's something else out there in their life that could more reasonably have been the culprit of that. So another one might be, and there's right now the PACT Act is out there. So if you served in Vietnam or actually a whole different time periods, different conflicts, especially for my post 9/11 vets, there's the PACT Act is out there. You should definitely Google the PACT Act presumptive claims and see if you fall into any of the criteria for presumptive conditions. There's a whole bunch of cancers in there. There's respiratory conditions, chronic sinusitis, rhinitis, asthma, I think is another one. But there's a whole bunch of them. And if you are not looking at the presumptive claims or conditions and seeing if you qualify, then you're definitely going to miss out on a claim that could be easily proven. It's like so easily proven that service connection will be so easy. You still need to, however, prove that you have a current diagnosis, and you also need to prove that the criteria. So for like the PACT Act, it'll say something like, the veteran must have served in this region of the world during this time. And, you need to be able to prove that with like orders or even a personal statement or your DD Form 214 if that information's on there. So, those are really, really easier ones to approve. You also need to be able to show like how bad your condition is so that you can get the proper rating. That's a big problem, especially for me. You need to be able to make sure that you show all of, like how impactful this thing is on your life and the symptoms that you experience, so that they can rate you properly on that, because each one of these presumptive conditions obviously has, more than one rating with the exception of tinnitus. I think the other ones are all pretty much have like a 10, a 20, or 30, and it goes up. So don't forget to check out the presumptive conditions to see if you qualify for any, because there's a whole bunch out there that a lot of veterans should be qualified to claim. All right, number 5 is not including secondary conditions. So secondary conditions essentially would be a condition that was caused by a currently connected condition. So let's say you got out of the military and you had, you were connected, even at a 0% for your neck pain that you had while you were in the military, the VA recognized it as a connected condition and they gave you a 0% rating. And then, in the past 10 years, your neck has gotten worse and now it's starting to cause headaches or migraines. You can't directly connect those migraines to your to service, right? Like if you can't, you can't. But if you feel like every time your neck is bothering, you start getting a headache, you might be able to connect the headaches to your service-connected neck injury or neck pain, and that would be an example of a secondary condition. And there's so many different secondary conditions that are out there. And in fact, if you want, like I have a 5-page document, it's free. If you type in secondary in the comments down below, I'll send you that list free. It's a swipe file. You could also just Google secondary conditions on the internet and it'll probably give you the same. But I put one together just as, it just says a kind of a cheat sheet. It also helps when you guys comment that down in the comment section below. It helps push this video out to other folks, so I would appreciate it, and I'll get that out to you as quickly as possible. The next one is going to be overlooking the importance of medical opinions. So, when I was going through this process, I like to ask my doctor, different questions to understand the VA process, and kind of like some of the rating criteria can be somewhat uneasy to understand, from a layperson that's not like in the medical field. So, in doing that, your doctor also might be able to help you out with a medical opinion on where they think you might rate. And if it's your personal doctor, they're probably not going to charge you anything except for maybe, your copay. But, don't overlook those opportunities with your own, medical professional to get that. And then, of course, there are other medical professionals out there that charge for independent medical opinions or nexus letters. I don't necessarily, suggest that anybody go out and pay for one of those letters, but there will be times potentially that you're trying to maybe connect a secondary condition and it might be appropriate, or maybe you're trying to appeal something that keeps getting denied. It might be appropriate to look into that. So definitely consult with a VSO or an accredited agent or an attorney before doing that, just to make sure you're not wasting time and money. I would hope that most of them are not out there to, do something that won't be helpful, but just in case, you want to make sure you're doing your own due diligence. Number 7 is not appealing. Look, you're going to face denials. You're going to get the opportunity to appeal. And just because you got a denial doesn't mean it's not possible to win. I've received so many denials. You basically are going to get 3 options when you get something denied. You're going to either get an opportunity to do a higher level review, a supplemental claim, or you can go up to the board. I've never done the board, but I've done the other 2. And I will tell you that, like, the decision letter, if you review it, it'll tell you exactly what you're missing, and you'll be able to figure out if you're able to get that. And if you can get that evidence, you can appeal. Just to quickly explain that process, a higher level review is you will review your denial letter, and you will make sure that they've reviewed every piece of evidence on there. And if you think they messed up, and believe me, they do mess up. One thing that I've found is that sometimes they just don't review all the evidence, and they don't put it in the evidence reviewed section. And if that happens, if you do a higher level review, especially if they say something's missing, but you have it in there, do a higher level review. They'll catch it, and they'll be able to approve you potentially, right? The higher level review, you're not going to be able to add additional evidence because you don't need to. It's just simply a higher level review. It goes to a senior rater, someone that may have more experience. They'll review it, make sure it was either accurate or not accurate, and then either approve or give you another denial letter. A supplemental claim is probably the one I have the most experience with, and that's essentially them saying, hey, like, you're still missing out on service connection, or you don't have a current diagnosis, or whatever it is, whatever they're saying you're missing. And sometimes they'll give you little hints, like, hey, you're missing this, but if you could show this, you'd be approved. And so then it kind of sends you out on like a little scavenger hunt. Now you're moving into trying to find additional evidence. Now, in order to do a supplemental claim, you must submit new and relevant evidence. And if it's not new and relevant, they'll just kick it back to you. So if that's mistake number 7. If you don't appeal, and you could have won with submitting additional evidence, you're not going to win. All right, number 8 is assuming that the VA will automatically increase your rating. So if you had a rating years ago and it got worse, or maybe you were underrated at the time, and then you've been going to the doctor. Let's say you've even been going to the VA, and like the VA doc's like, yeah, your condition's getting worse. They're not going to just automatically increase your rating. You have to submit a claim to increase your rating. So I think it's good every couple of years, or just know what your conditions are and what you have service connected, and just check every once in a while. You can Google it. You can Google your condition, Google the rating criteria. 38 CFR plus your condition will tell you, what you should be at 10%, 20%, 30%. And you can kind of eyeball it and say, you know what, I think I should be higher. And then you can go for an additional increase. But I will say, be careful with that, because if you poke the bear and you're wrong, you could get denied or not. You could get decreased. So, definitely consult with your VSO or whoever you're working with that's accredited. And then, number 9, underestimating the importance of a VSO. I've had some good luck and some bad luck with VSOs. If you go into a VSO and you really don't know what you're doing, you may not have a lot of luck. A lot of them are just too busy to deal with everybody. But they can be valuable. They can see things. They can they can look up things on their system, so it can be helpful. They can provide you with really good advice to keep you like aligned with what you need. I had a really bad experience initially, and so I just kind of did everything myself, and then I floated over to a VSO who was super helpful. But I think that it was because I had done so much research on my own that like we were able to work well together. So that's just something to think about. I do think that getting the evidence on your own, or understanding the system, the process on your own, is helpful in getting getting to the point where meeting with a VSO will just be like a force multiplier. And then number 10 is giving up after denial. It is so easy to give up. It's so easy when the VA says no to just say, I'm done. I want to encourage you not to give up. If you think that it should be service connected, you think that you should have a certain rating, just go prove it. Just grab the evidence and, don't lose. Don't give up. The process does suck. It can be cumbersome, but if you believe it, just continue until you get to the point where maybe you agree with the VA. But if you think that you should have something and it's just going to require a little bit of effort in getting the right evidence, don't give up. The VA has systems set up where you can basically do a higher level review, get denied, do a supplemental review, get denied, do another higher level review. Like, you can keep the ball rolling. Obviously, don't waste time on something that's not going to work. And if you're consulting with a VSO and they can't, like if it's possible, don't give up.